So I want to go on here to talk about something that most people don't know about. The ICO space obviously gets covered in the headlines, but many people don't really understand something that I talk about on my channel a lot, known as OTC markets. And I've been dying to talk about it because it's gotten me completely encapsulated and optimistic for cryptocurrencies in one of the times that obviously doesn't seem so optimistic in the market. You know, we've seen prices go down a bit. We've seen Bitcoin go down from its peak in December, from 20,000 down towards around $6,000 right now. Yet, at the same time, institutions are getting more eager than ever. It's just that we don't see it because it's not happening on the exchanges or the platforms that we're aware of. It's happening in what's known as OTC markets. So what does OTC stand for? OTC stands for over-the-counter, and this is a measure where most institutions are buying their money. It's a swapping system rather than going on the exchanges we all know. I think if people were to probably get a visualization of trying to think, how would institutions buy Bitcoin? Many people might picture the same way they would. They would think that maybe Jamie Dimon is going on Coinbase and buying his first Bitcoin like his daughter did. Well, it's not like that. It happens a little bit outside of the window that we're familiar with. But OTC is not very complicated in crypto. Basically what it is it's two different intermediaries, one with Bitcoin and one with cash in this case of some sort, and going through an intermediary, whether it be a smaller company or an official registered exchange or broker, and swapping at an effective rate. So in this case, for example, let's say we have one party with 100 Bitcoin. That's a lot of Bitcoin to go out on an exchange for. And we'll realize why they choose OTC because of this. And we also have someone as well with $600,000. It's a lot of capital. And luckily at this time, the OTC broker in the middle finds that, hey, the effective rate for Bitcoin right now, the market rate is $6,000. We can do an effective swap where we don't even have to put this on an order book on the exchange. So this is a very, very effective means for people who have large amounts of money. There's not only benefits to privacy that we'll go into later on, and we'll talk about that's why it's so private and we don't hear about this, but along with that as well, why this is effective for both the traders in this case, the institutional traders with larger money, but also for us as traders on a common exchange. And it's something known as slippage. So slippage is something that affects all markets. It can affect stocks. It can affect anything where there's a buyer and a seller. And we can see slippage go both ways sometimes. We love seeing when prices rally like this. If large investors come in and buy up a lot of cryptocurrency, it pushes the price up. The demand is starting to settle in, and the supply isn't there as much as obviously the demand is. So in that case, you get a massive move in price. And you can even see as well on the chart, this is where the big institutions were starting to buy in. You can also see as well the selling. But over here, we see a big trend to the upside where a lot of institutional volume is starting to come in rather than in the past where it was relatively thin. So we might like slippage to the upside. It might be saying win Lambo, win Moon, but outside of that, many people might be looking at this chart and saying win OTC. So we don't like when it plays the way we don't expect it to go. We only want the institutions to buy in, but we have to understand that people are buying and selling in very large amounts. And in this case, we obviously see that it can play both ways because a trade always involves a buyer and it involves a seller. So you're going to have both happen if we don't have OTC markets on exchanges where things become very, very volatile. So going on here, what are some of the institutions that are buying into cryptocurrencies? Again, I was emphasizing early on in the presentation that I think we have a big misconception that bankers are the only factor in traditional finance, and I think that's a big misconception. From what I've been able to study within OTC markets, we have a variety of different forms of finance or institutional finance that are getting in. We have family funds as well as hedge funds. And I want to spend some time emphasizing this because before I studied in cryptocurrencies, I was very big on learning about power structure in finance and learning about kind of the big players and what they do in traditional markets. But what you find is that family funds and hedge funds are heavily based in what's known as offshore havens. This is countries like Switzerland and the Netherlands, as well as offshore islands like the Cayman Islands. And this is where a lot of money is stowed away. In fact, there's been estimates that this is anywhere from around $21 to $32 trillion. So in a much less regulated space, money that, again, wants to be diversified, that wants to be exposed to a variety of markets, that's a lot of money to deal with in cryptocurrencies. And it's going to be the first level of equity, or the first level of capital, which has already started to move into the space. But we also have a few other big buyers that are coming soon. ETP providers, which are exchange-traded product providers. So we've been hearing a lot of talks about a Bitcoin ETF coming out soon, which I think many of us are excited about because it's going to open up the door for people to buy Bitcoin very simply through their brokerage account. And in this case, ETP providers who make these exchange-traded funds or different types of financial products, in most cases need to back up those funds with cryptocurrency, the actual underlying asset or commodity, however you want to see it. And though it might not be believed to be true, there have been many rumors in this private space that some banks are starting to get involved in purchasing cryptocurrency in OTC markets, which is really interesting. The one thing that could come to compete with the underlying powers who dictate monetary policy. Some of them are starting to realize it's that disruptive and that if they don't expose themselves, they might lose everything. They might not have any standing on their actual purchasing power or the money that they have saved and invested. So how much money are we talking? How much is dealing in these markets and where are they doing this bidding? Where are they doing the trading? Well, the OTC market is very gray. It's generally the twilight zone of cryptocurrencies, whereas we don't even understand what's happening on the exchanges, what larger whales in the space who have mined Bitcoin early on are doing. How do we get a picture of the OTC market that's relatively private? Well, we know that there's a few different exchanges that have come public and talked about the kind of levels that they trade. We have some that are more well-known in the crypto space. We have Kraken, we have, for example, HitBTC, some more relevant names that some of us have probably traded on that also offer OTC trading. This is anywhere from a few 10 million to 100 million per month in cryptocurrency trading. And then we start to go across the board and see that it expands to much larger levels. We have DRW Cumberland. We also have Circle, as well as other players such as Genesis that are processing around $2 to $4 billion a month. But the big money comes in a big gray area. This is the off-exchange transactions for OTC. This is real hardcore OTC. And when you talk about some of the large family funds and a lot of large individuals in the financial sector, many of them are trading off exchange. Why? Because they want privacy. And when you really get a picture of what this looks like, it might seem kind of silly, but at the same time you can understand how effective it is. Something that I always tell people that kind of throws them off with OTC markets, I was told it when I was visiting a trip back in Thailand with someone who worked in OTC markets, was that they reached over to me and they said, "Nick, what do you think the largest exchange is in cryptocurrencies?" And you probably think of the standard ones, Coinbase or Binance or some normal exchange that we trade on. And she said, "No, Nick, it's not. It's Telegram." And I was kind of thrown back a little bit. I was like, that's not even a trading application or an exchange. How is it the largest exchange? And it's because OTC works with an intermediary and bringing people together to trade large quantities. And Telegram does that great. You have encrypted chatting. You also have Skype, for example, where many of these trades happen. We don't have a figure for this because it's practically entirely private, unless you actually work in OTC markets in this case. But we are pretty confident, people who have analyzed the OTC space, people who work in it, who get to see the kind of numbers that are trading, that the amount of volume we see in OTC exceeds that of actual exchanges at the moment. And that shows you a good picture of what the institutions are doing because they're generally buying from people who aren't bearish. They're people who have mined cryptocurrencies, people who have large stakes from the beginning, who probably obviously want to hedge their positions and diversify. So there's a lot of buying pressure right now, a lot of people who want to get a large stake. And it's all those people we talked about earlier, the family funds, the hedge funds, and yes, even both exchange traded product creators and banks. So there's a lot to take into account there that we have no official number on, but we know that it's billions of dollars on a daily basis, which is really, really exciting. So I want to talk a little bit more about potential here because we can talk about what what institutions are generally doing with cryptocurrencies. We can talk about how they're very optimistic rather than what they say in the media. But the question is really what market are we dealing with and how big can this get? Because many people I think have differing opinions on what cryptocurrencies really are. There are a wide plethora of different objectives, different ideas, different ecosystems. Each ICO is selling you to be the next Bitcoin and do something greater than the last. And because of that, it's hard to get a picture of all of this. But even though there's the speculative investment side to cryptocurrencies where we expect some type of return in these markets, what we're really dealing with is an emerging currency market. These are cryptocurrencies. Some of them can be seen as securities, some of them can be seen more as utility tokens. no matter how you see it as, the mass majority of cryptocurrency valuation is in the application of currency. And I think it's the best application for using blockchain and decentralized systems like DAGs. So when we're dealing with an emerging currency market, let's understand really what features cryptocurrencies bring. Why is this different than traditional currencies? And how big is it compared to traditional currencies? Well, right now, cryptocurrencies are sitting nicely around $250 billion. And if you were to say that number to most people, they'd probably say that's overextended, it's not worth that valuation, and that's probably going to be where the peak is. Well, back just a few months ago, we were sitting around $800 billion. But even though that number seems so large, it's actually quite minimal in the grand scheme of the world of finance and currencies. If we take it into scale, we'll see just how minimal cryptocurrencies are comparative to traditional currency markets. Now, this number is a relatively controversial number. It depends on how you measure currency. But the lower figures are estimating that currency markets stand at around $84 to $200 trillion, and it depends on the types of money supplies that you factor in, M1 and M2. But even if we were to take the conservative number here of $84 trillion, think about the distance of where we still have to go with cryptocurrencies. And we have to understand what these currencies are as well. You know, we've been talking about traditional finance here. I mean, really, if you understand what money is, it's pieces of paper or numbers in a centralized database of banks who have continued to fail at managing monetary policy. It's not backed by anything. It's backed by the trust of the economies and those who regulate the currency to have sound regulating policies. But with cryptocurrencies, we have utility. We have, in many cases, immutability, censorship resistance. We have the ability to send money from here in Lithuania all the way over to countries like Japan, whether it be $5 or 100 million in a matter of minutes and for a fraction of pennies. That's something that's been unheard of in a world where remittance payments can take days, weeks, and cost dozens of dollars to send any standard transaction, or hundreds of thousands to millions if you're doing large wire transfers. So there's a huge value set here, and there's still so much room for growth, at least in my opinion. I can tell you in the 7 years that I've studied financial markets, I've never seen something so disruptive and something with so much potential for expansion. So the best thing I can say to summarize things up is that when you hear in the media, I thought I had to throw in a little joke there at the end. When you hear Jamie Dimon and the major figureheads of finance come out and say that cryptocurrency is a fraud, that it doesn't work sound as currency, and they treat it as something that will never be able to expand into a massive, well-developed and usable market of currencies and exchange of value, I would always say to not follow the FUD and to not follow the FOMO that many people promote, and rather follow the money. That has been my policy as I study traditional financial markets. And here in cryptocurrencies, I'm doing the exact same thing. The only thing I can say is that I've been very, very excited about what I've seen. And I hope you are too. Thank you.